Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thank you all for joining today's webinar titled Learn to Think Like a Hacker to Stop Attacks Faster by Using the MITRE ATT&CK Framework. And the presenter for today's webinar will be Mike Zuckerman. My name is Navneet, and I will be your host for today's session. Today's webinar will be about 60 minutes, and it is being recorded. A replay of the session will be sent to you all after the live event in about 24 to 36 hours, and you will also get the PowerPoint presentation along with the recording. Also, you're all welcome to submit your questions throughout the session today through the Q&A box on the left side of your screen, and we will answer as many questions as we can at the conclusion of the presentation. And now, without further ado, I'll pass it along to our presenter for today. And Mike, please take it away.
Thank you, Navneet. Well, welcome. So first, I'd like to say I'm supported by a massive internal SOC team at Infoblox, threat intelligence specialists, software engineers, developers, and product managers that all know MITRE ATT&CK and contributed substantially to the body of knowledge that we represent. Today, we're going to start at 1,000 feet and immerse ourselves at some point in unforgivable detail, and then rise up with style to summarize at the end and make it look a lot simpler than it may have been. For the agenda, you can see we're going to overview MITRE ATT&CK, why we think it's important, MITRE ATT&CK in context to other techniques and things that you use, other frameworks, highlight some of the strong points like the common lexicon, share a little bit about how to get started. And I think perhaps the most useful thing is the use case discussion, so you can walk away and say, well, if I use this tool, this is where I'll attack my problems first, right? So what is MITRE ATT&CK? MITRE ATT&CK is a framework, security framework, developed by the MITRE Corporation. And it is essentially a comprehensive knowledge base or database of cyber attacker tactics, techniques, and procedures gathered from actual observation of attacker behavior. So you know, MITRE Corp is a nonprofit which was founded in '58 and does work for the U.S. government in a wide variety of areas. You can see what MITRE ATT&CK stands for: adversarial tactics, techniques, and common knowledge. As an important and perhaps critical knowledge base, MITRE ATT&CK enables anyone on the cyber defense team to review and contrast cyber attacker activity and then understand the best options for defense. In short, the premise here is that you need to think like an attacker to better defend your enterprise. The skill and quantity and ferocity of attackers is increasing every year, and you need to get better skill sets to deal with it. So why is the framework so important? There are a lot of other things you can do. Well, MITRE ATT&CK has segmented attacks in a very consistent way that makes it easy for you to compare them and then to determine how an attacker might have exploited or could exploit your network. Most attacker analysis has focused on their activities in terms of perimeter defense. Not anymore. The perimeter looks more like Swiss cheese than not in most large enterprise. So MITRE ATT&CK assumes you're going to get people in the door no matter what you do, but let's take a closer look at them once they get in. Let's figure out what they're up to. Let's stop them, and thereby, eliminate the bad effects of theft or financial loss. Given the increased porosity of the perimeter, the movement to the cloud and mobile devices, the greater ability of attackers to morph and change tools that we used to find with static signature analysis, it is really likely that attackers will penetrate your network repeatedly, I might add. So the battle is moved in-house to tools like MITRE ATT&CK and strategies like Zero Trust, because you're going to get these people in your network, so let's find them, let's get them out. So given this assumption, a detailed focus on attacker behavior, such as provided by MITRE ATT&CK, is the best investment, perhaps, to find and stop an ongoing attack before data exfiltration or destructive behavior can be achieved. It's sort of like, pay me now with a small investment in a new and improved open defensive framework, or pay the attacker much more later. But you just can't count on keeping them out. So MITRE ATT&CK is an essential tool to help you battle on this new ground, which is inside your networks. MITRE ATT&CK, you'll find, is truly authoritative and complete as it could be, as complete as any framework I've seen out there. The MITRE ATT&CK Framework gives you this comprehensive taxonomy, or think of it as a tree structure or a database, to post-exploitation cyber attacker behavior, right? Therein. This helps you balance your defense against the steps that the attacker will take. The end goal in MITRE ATT&CK is that you can make better decisions about risk, deploying new security controls, and defending the network. Once again, better, faster, and lower risk decisions save you money and reduce compliance trauma and make the organization more successful. It's a game of time right now. There's also, so you see it on the chart, MITRE pre-attack, which helps you prevent an attack before the attacker can get into the network. This is more traditional. In essence, the 15 top-level categories for pre-attack, which I won't cover, kind of correlate to the first two stages of the Lockheed Martin kill chain, which is certainly famous and well known. A pre-attack presents the tactics, underlying techniques, and procedures that a cyber attacker will use to define their targets, gather information, and then, of course, launch an attack upon your organization. There are several other important security frameworks, such as the Lockheed Martin Cyber Kill Chain, ISO IEC 2700, NIST, and COBIT. I bring these up because I don't want this presentation to be viewed in any way, shape, or form as contrasting these frameworks so that you can position one as better than another. They're all extremely useful, they're all extremely important, and each of them gives you different things depending on your organization size and role that you play that you might find useful. The Lockheed Martin Cyber Kill Chain Framework is absolutely the most well-known. Lockheed Martin was fighting the cyber wars, for Department of Defense missions long before most of us even saw ransomware pop up on our PC AT, back in the late 80s. And so the cyber kill chain, is famous for defining the 7 steps, recon, weaponization, delivery, exploit, control, execute, and maintain, right? All of this enhanced visibility into an attack, help the security analysts better understand the tactics, techniques, and procedures, and it's still very relevant today. ISO 2700 is promulgated by ISO, which is a standards organization globally that has over 150 member bodies, and so each of them puts information together and they go back and forth and committee this stuff, and the result is very, very good. I'm an electrical engineer by background, and so I've seen a lot of ISO standards in a lot of areas, of which 2700 is a really good one. NIST is developed by the National Institute of Standards and Tech. This is a really important framework. You should be looking and using NIST also. NIST is responsible by charter for identifying and developing risk frameworks for voluntary use by what they call critical infrastructure owners. And as far as I'm concerned, my infrastructure is critical, right? So I want to know everything I can. As in the case of MITRE ATT&CK, the NIST framework, presents a common language to address and manage cyber risk. So NIST and MITRE are complementary in many ways, and organizations often find benefit in both. COBIT is one that, you might not know the acronym. It stands for Control Objectives, OB, Objectives for Information and Related Technologies, but you certainly would know the organization that creates it, which is ISACA. ISACA, is the Information Systems Audit and Control Association. They do a lot of certification of cybersecurity, and COBIT 5 is really good stuff. So net, all of these frameworks are great things to use. MITRE ATT&CK is distinguished and differentiated a bit from the ones I just went through by the deep and detailed data on what an attack looks like from the attacker's perspective. So MITRE ATT&CK really focuses on they're in my network. Who are they? What are they going to do next? How can I stop them? Because if you can break their kill chain, their technique-to-technique linkage, you stop the attack. You know, it's not okay, but they did get in the perimeter, but at least we can stop them and shut them down. And so that's what MITRE ATT&CK is going to help you do. MITRE ATT&CK, at the highest level of value, brings a common lexicon or a common language in a common, easy-to-navigate taxonomy to describe the activities of the cyber attackers that are out there and the step-by-step tactics and techniques that they use. This enables you and your team and other outside parties you may contract with to start to communicate better with each other, you know, in that cyber community on the details of your threat, right? It's really hard to describe things and to link them together and to communicate among the group. You know, MITRE provides a really strong framework to describe, you know, your security controls, your processes, and how all this ties together. Probably, you know, as we say here, at the most basic level, MITRE allows the security operations defenders to identify the nature of the threat, map it back, and then, you know, determine whether or not the controls we have are effective. The sources of data that MITRE uses to develop a knowledge base include malware samples, security conference presentations, threat intel reporting. You know, all the key threat intel organizations share data either publicly or behind the scenes, and a variety of other public and private sources, including social media, blogs, webinars. Wherever there's data, you know, they keep an eye on it. Red teams and the techniques they use, which ties to one of our big use cases, are also an excellent source of data, because red teams are constantly trying to break our cyber defenses, sort of the white hat attackers. Okay, so we need to just step back in time. We all know what they are, but let's review it, because everything in MITRE is about tactics, techniques, and procedures, right? So we got to know it, learn it, love it, right? A tactic represents the goal that the attacker is trying to achieve. A technique represents the ways that a cyber attacker can achieve the goal and thereby gain the objectives of the tactic. And last, of course, procedures represent the steps that an attacker takes to execute a technique or sequence of techniques. It's kind of wash, rinse, repeat, because everything in MITRE is organized this way. And whether you're a pro, you know, you're one of the people that already knows all about MITRE, or you're just brand new to the SOC, you got your cybersecurity certification, if you can think and wrap your mind around MITRE ATT&CK, you'll gain efficiency and effectiveness much faster, and you'll be able to do your job much better. And so this structure, you know, wrapping ourselves around the TTP analysis and the way they chain together is highly effective for communications and efficiency. The MITRE ATT&CK matrix provides a navigable taxonomy to all the techniques that you might see. So in the enterprise matrix, it navigates to techniques that might involve Windows, Mac, and Linux, right? Each of the 12 tactics, really they run across the top here. We'll show you more, but this is sort of a close-up sample. The 12 tactics to frame include between 9 and 67 techniques that might be used. In some cases, techniques are used by several tactics. Once again, what you see is a very partial representation of the matrix, and not all the techniques are visible for sure. You can only see here maybe 7 of the top 12 tactics across the top and a smattering of the techniques, but you can kind of see the structure: tactic, technique, procedure. And there's a lot more. So let's take a look at each of these top tactics, and let's take a deeper dive. Okay. Once again, tactics represent the goals the attacker is trying to achieve. Let's be clear, none of these goals are good for us. All of this is bad stuff that we want to stop. Any place in the kill chain we can stop it. If we can stop it or stall it, we have victory. So the first of the 12 tactics, which is called initial access, really includes all the techniques that use various entry vectors to gain an initial foothold within the network. So techniques used to gain a foothold, you'll see later, include spear phishing, exploiting weaknesses on public-facing servers. Footholds gained through initial access may also allow for continued access, like valid accounts, the use of external remote services, or maybe of limited use once passwords change, right? And so that's initial access. We'll skim through these quickly, right? Execution consists of techniques that result in adversary-controlled code running on your local or remote systems. And techniques that run malicious code are often paired with techniques from other tactics to reach a bigger goal, like exploring the network or stealing data. So an adversary might use a tool like PowerShell script to do remote system discovery. So that's the second major category of tactics. And likewise, we see persistence, techniques adversaries use to keep access to systems across restarts, change credentials, and other interrupts that could cut off their access. So when the system gets rebooted, they're in there, right? That's very important to them. They can't achieve the goals of their kill chain 99% of the time, usually without gaining persistence. Privilege escalation. Most of you know what that is, right? I want to get administrator passwords. I want to execute techniques that get me these higher level permissions. And there's system weaknesses, misconfigs, vulnerabilities. And, once they get that administrator access, we're in serious trouble, right? This is one of the reasons why I might mention it once or twice. Any place that there's a password, nowadays, we should have a second factor. It used to be cumbersome. The users used to complain. Banks used to use it just for certain major customer access points, even 15, 20 years ago. But today, everybody needs two-factor authentication. It's probably the cheapest way to stop spurious logins. And using these permissions. Defensive evasion. How can they avoid detection? Here you can see our low-life attacker attempting to scurry away, but we need to be able to know what they're up to and what they're doing. You'll also see credential access, which goes back to stealing credentials like account names and passwords. I can't tell you how many companies have a spreadsheet labeled PSSWD, and you think, no, they would never do that. And then I've run into some where even the administrator passwords are one-time use. They need a token they must get from an administrator password server just to use it every time. So, you run the spectrum here of things, but this is one of the keys to the kingdom that they must reach to be successful. Discovery, followed by lateral movement, the techniques that an adversary can use to gain knowledge about the system, the internal network, to observe the environment and orient themselves before they decide to act. So they're getting ready, to compromise you, and they've already been in there too long, right, at this point. Lateral movement, we all know, right? This is a major tactic. They're navigating through your network. They're figuring out more stuff. This is why people are implementing network segmentation and network software microsegmentation and really the whole zero trust strategy, because they will get in your network. And the old school of, they're in the network, we trust them now, throw that out the window, right? So MITRE breaks out this tactic as a category and thinks about it hard. Collection, adversary techniques to gather information and sources, relevant to their objectives. So think about the hacks of the SWIFT financial network. We heard about that over the past few years now and then. So a hacker gets inside the network, and they observe the use of a very secure and well-architected system like SWIFT because of weaknesses in the bank network, perhaps, right? And it's not knocking the bank. The hackers are very strong and very capable. And so they're watching what is the procedure that you take to do a wire transfer. Exactly. How does it flow? What time periods elapse? And as part of their data collection, they're snooping on browsers, audio, video, email. They're capturing screenshots and keyboard input. So when they're at this point, usually you're close to game over, right? Your compliance team is going to be at DEF CON level 5 in a week or two if you don't stop them sooner. So this is a dangerous place to be. Command and control are the adversary, of course, wants to communicate with the system, and that includes all the techniques to do that. And so this is where tools like DNS security can help. Anytime someone's reaching out of your enterprise, threat intelligence and DNS security and other things should be pouring over those IP addresses, because usually, without having access to the outside, they can't do as much. They can't achieve their goals. So this is an important one. Exfiltration, we know what that means. Exfiltration means they're stealing your data, and we're in serious trouble now. The green flags, the yellow flags, the red flags went off, and now they're moving data outside your organization, and we're in serious trouble. Impact is perhaps worse in many ways, because not only have they stolen stuff from you, but worse, they're trying to destroy your operations, whether it's for political reasons. Country A attacks the infrastructure in country B. It could be for just malintent. Someone decides that they don't like this bank and they want to hurt them. There's the reasons abound, but the bottom line is they're attacking your infrastructure, intent on destroying it. And if you remember the movie The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, that old Clint Eastwood Western from years ago, this is the ugly. They're literally trying to shut down your business and cause you harm. These are the things that, when you're in the finance department, you're in many other departments, you have a job, you have a routine job, it's important. You could argue that sometimes you're under attack, but not really. When you work in IT or the network organization or cybersecurity or the SOC, you are under attack. And, we recognize that people are trying to hurt our company, shut us down, and hurt our livelihoods. That's what's going on here. So these are all serious things. So those are sort of the top-level tactics that MITRE maps out and then brings you to the techniques under them. Techniques represent the different ways that cyber attackers can achieve the goals and objectives of the tactic, right? So MITRE helps you get insight into how they execute their techniques. So with attack, you can drill into techniques by sort of double-clicking on the technique ID or name, and you'll see data that pops up with a deeper and deeper explanation of the technique, possible mitigation, which we'll talk about later, and really examples of the malware associated with this technique by the cyber attackers. So if we drilled into automated exfiltration, you're going to see notes on things like Cosmic Duke, Honeybee, Light Neuron Rover, USB Stealer malware, and tools that tie to this technique execution. So that's important and useful information. There's also guidance for detection and all of the publicly available references, really useful to you. And a lot of your threat intelligence vendors will start to tie this data into their front ends, because it's just tremendously useful data in fighting the war that we have to fight. So how does this really look? So here's what's super cool about MITRE ATT&CK. In this graphic we created, you can see how attackers daisy chain their techniques together using their tools to deliver, kind of their unique and really recognizable attack chain. Note that it is very hard for the attackers to change the tactic, techniques, and procedures they use. It is really a fingerprint of who they are. I may say this again, right? As they move from technique to technique, they provide clues and hints as to their identity. What you get from that is the likely next steps they might take and the best ways to stop them, right, before they can exfiltrate your data or shut your operations down. So in a bit, I'll show you the MITRE ATT&CK tools that provide this view. And it's got an interactive front end. It's a very cool tool. But let's track one fictitious path, through MITRE ATT&CK and see what that looks like, just to get a sense of this, right? So in this attack chain, they start out with a bootkit attack, right? And then you can continue to move through to, adversaries using credential and files technique. And so, they search local files and remote file shares, and they find files with passwords. This happens all the time. Once again, attackers try to live off the land, and they will use your tools if they can to reduce suspicion. So sometimes it's hard to spot these things. Network shared discovery, another technique example. Networks contain shared drives and folders, and if they can get in there, they work in Windows over the SMB protocol, they've got more access, more information. A pass the ticket is a way of authenticating to a system using Kerberos tickets, but without having access to the password. And so, this is another technique they're using. And so you can see with MITRE, you can move through the attack framework technique by technique, and you can try and figure out, what they're doing next, which is what you need to know, right? The last technique here to highlight is data obfuscation. And, I could spend a lot of time here. There's many, many techniques, but I think you get the sense of the framework and picture that you're able to put together now. You can see the execution of the attacker techniques versus the goals you're trying to achieve. You can start to fingerprint who they are, and you can start to be preemptive with a strike to shut them down and get them out of your networks. Attack groups is something that MITRE ATT&CK has also built out. MITRE attack groups helps you, the term I would use is disambiguate attacker names, and has developed a solid database for the use of techniques and software tools by these groups. If you look in the group section of MITRE ATT&CK, you'd see 91 groups defined. This is where the action is. State-sponsored terrorists, ransomware as a service groups, pretty much evil incorporated, right? We know who they are some of the time. Most of them are here. This is like the FBI most wanted list at the post office. So this is a good way to understand, who's threatening your organization potentially. So MITRE disambiguates them by mapping them to publicly reported technique use. It's not 100% certain, but it's darn good and likely authoritative. This is not all the techniques these groups will use, only those available through open source reporting, which MITRE audits, but I can tell you it is pretty darn good. Groups are highly useful, again, that you can map them to the threat intel you have about who's most likely to threaten your organization in your industry and your geography, right? That's why a lot of people use Infoblox threat intel, right? And then when you know who they are, you can look at their techniques, and you can start to look at your cyber defense and say, am I set up to deal with this? If APT3 is a threat to me in my industry and my geography and my business size or my political orientation, whatever it is, how will I fare against their attack? And if I've got gaps, what am I going to do about it? So this enables you to better set priorities for incremental improvement to your cyber defense, based upon risk assessment. So it's really a great thing. So if we look at APT3, we can see, well, they're a China-based threat group attributed to China's Ministry of State Security, but they've also got a lot of other names, right? A lot of other names that you'll see them under. And, now you can start, as you do your research, you see different names. You can start to understand, how you can piece components of intel together to figure this out. When you look at APT3 more closely, you can also see the tools that they use. So this is an excerpt of a MITRE attack table that shows the software tool ID, the common name. There's many more software tools, and you can drill into them. When they use the living off the land technique, it's harder to figure these things out, but when they've got a very specific tool that you can find, then you can link that tool back, to their behavior and their identity. So this is really, really valuable for you. MITRE has also built out a few adversary emulation plans, or AEPs. This is the first 2 pages of a very substantial document they put together, and this really showcases the practical use of MITRE ATT&CK for offensive operators and defensive operators. These are prototype documents of what can be done with publicly available threat reports and attack, and they don't cover the entire space, but it's really worth looking at APT3 or others on their website just to get a sense of how powerful this information is. The purpose of this is, again, to test your networks and defenses, right? So a red team can take this data and can more accurately model adversary behavior as described by attack. It's part of a bigger process you should have to test products and environments and focus on behavior rather than specific IOCs, or if you're lucky enough to find a specific tool. So, signatures are wonderful when they work, but they just don't work like they used to, and you've got to find someone inside your network. They're in there. Find them now by their behavior. Figure out how to break the kill chain, and you're as good as gold. Key takeaway. There are many threat intel reports that focus on malware reverse engineering, the compromise, command and control, and these are all valuable things. But there are not many threat reports on how attackers are chaining together techniques, how they're operating on their keyboard blow by blow. That's what you're getting from here. So, if you're facing sophisticated attackers, which means you're a bank, you're a healthcare institution, you're a manufacturer, right? You know who you are. This is a really useful tool to get yourself organized. With a slightly closer look, this is a graphic view of APT3 and sort of shows you what MITRE has spelled out for you in the AEP plan. And this is really great stuff. It helps you think logically about what they're trying to do to you and calmly so that you can, avoid attacks or discover them mid-cycle and then terminate them. So now we're going to look at probably your best counterintelligence weapon of war, right? This is one of the coolest tools in MITRE ATT&CK. I took a screenshot of the MITRE ATT&CK Navigator. Check it out. This is really uber cool. It gives you, we're just looking at part of the screen, but all of the tactics and all of the techniques. And you can navigate the matrix and then customize it to highlight cells or delete cells. So suppose, you're in the SOC, you're 3 minutes away from Armageddon every moment of the day, right? You've got millions of alerts flying by. You're trying to figure out what's going on, and boom, something registers, with a high-level alert that's serious trouble. And now you're trying to build out, you're looking for IOCs, you're looking for trying to figure out who they are and what they're doing, right? And this gives you a structure to start to figure out what you have, figure out what they're doing, piece it together, and then everyone in your organization can start to relate this to, what's known in MITRE ATT&CK and what's known elsewhere to identify them based upon their behavior, based upon what they're doing, right? These are the techniques that, sophisticated players like the FBI and other unnamed but well-loved intelligence agencies would use to really get the picture, right? And so this tool lets you highlight, lets you use this. You can map your attack in a share. And today a lot of people do the equivalent of this with a non-standard taxonomy in a spreadsheet. You know who you are, right? And that's okay. But this automates it, makes it generic, and gives you that common language. You can define layers, custom views, and this is a great tool. You need to know about this and find out more how this can benefit your SOC team and the other members of your organization. Enterprise mitigations is just something I don't even have the time, I think, to cover it the way I'd like to. But this is a list of, it's a cool feature, for sure, that shows you recommended actions to defeat one or more of the techniques being used by an attacker. And they do this for enterprise, mobile, and you can drill into each mitigation. So when you click on a mitigation, boom, you zoom right into the list of techniques they will defeat. So for example, let's look at Active Directory configuration. I can't list them all here, but there's about 20 plus techniques in a long list defeated and stopped in this suggested mitigation. One that you'll find really interesting is the full list of suggestions for the mitigation, disable or remove feature or program. If you're a typical enterprise, you know through common language, you read Krebs on security, we all keep up, right? And you know that I should turn this off, or that RDP server over there is a scary thing, right? We should get rid of that. But it's hard to keep up, and MITRE's, another source of information helping you out based upon common think and openware and binding all of the consensus together in a place that you can find these things. So at the 1,000-foot view, regardless of whether or not you implement the MITRE ATT&CK framework, it's really worth going through that list of mitigations just to see the knowledge that you can gain from it. If you're a small or mid-sized enterprise, you likely have many of these vulnerabilities open right now, and truly a cyber attacker could probably drive a truck through the holes. They're so large. So this is really useful stuff, and it's a really good takeaway to know this is here. It's another resource for you. And MITRE has no commercial bias. They're not trying to get you to buy anything or do anything. They're just open source nonprofit help. So it's a really good thing. So the obvious question people have is, how do I get started with this, right? How do I start with MITRE ATT&CK? You can initially select the security controls you have in your current environment. You can map that back to MITRE ATT&CK, and then you can start to assess the controls you have against the tactics and techniques which will execute against them, right? So am I covered? You can identify gaps. You can assess risk. Risk is a very key word for everybody, whether you're in IT, cybersecurity, executive management, or compliance or governance, right? And the threats that cause that risk and make decisions to improve them. So it gives you really the bigger picture. You can start to align your defenses against the likely threats you will face. You can actually use this tool to explain to management and the board what you need to do and why. Okay, these are the threats we face. These are the things they'll do. Here's how our security control infrastructure, personnel and processes can defend against it, and here's where we can't. So based upon threat intelligence and what's happening in our industry, these are the security controls we need to provide, right? And you can also model specific attacks. So if a board member says, what's going to happen if we get hit with APT23? We hear that's hitting other banks or whatever. You can model that specific attack, using MITRE ATT&CK, and then look at the corresponding abilities of your controls to help mitigate that. Use cases really make the world go round, right? It's sort of, it's like where you start and then how you actually get something done, right? What do you do? All the use cases should provide, good return on investment and reduce risk. Risk is the word. It's the CISO word. It's the, CIO word. And if you can reduce your risk and you can stop more of these events before they succeed, you've done your job as best you can and you save money. So let's look at some of the use cases that we have. Red team testing. This is probably the first and well-known for MITRE ATT&CK. Red teams, of course, are external contractors or an internal isolated and very specialized team of employees that just pound away on your security program. They emulate the behaviors and techniques of attackers, and they look to see what they can break. MITRE ATT&CK allows the red team to use a standard lexicon and an organized approach to picking the tactics and techniques that they'll do. And it's not, there's always someone in every organization, Joe or Sam or Sherry, the expert that's got everything in their head that spins out spreadsheets. But MITRE ATT&CK gives you a way to standardize this and customize this and get more of the organization in alignment with it. So you can, your red team can model real-world attackers both by the technique they use, very important, in the sequence in which they deploy them, as well as the software tools they use. So forget homegrown checklists and incomplete spreadsheets. They work, but MITRE ATT&CK is now the best practice view of attacker TTPs. That's where the industry is headed pretty quickly. Threat intelligence. Threat intelligence pours in. It's valuable, but the SOC and the blue team are never sure what to do, because right now on my screen, my SIEM is pumping alerts at me. What do I do with this? What should I do, right? So cyber defenders need to move from a dependence on IOCs and hard metrics like a hash, a signature, an IP address alone, to a more behavioral approach, right? And so MITRE ATT&CK provides a way to structure threat intelligence and, wrap that in to your environment. Rather than focus on indicators, now you can start to think about behavioral identification and then map that back, right? If you can present it and you can understand it, you can identify perhaps the attacker, the gaps, what's going to happen next, then, thereby build a mitigation plan to go with it, right? So MITRE ATT&CK goes hand in hand with threat intel. Blue teams, and I added purple teams. It's probably a separate use case, but who's counting, right? So blue teams are the internal security group that defends against external threats and attackers. And when required, the red team, they also stand toe-to-toe with the red team. Blue teams are really sort of your 24-hour vigilance against attack. SOC teams rotate every 8 hours, but the blue, and they're lifeblood critical, but the blue team, these guys and gals are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week to nail attacks. And so this gives them a better view to anatomy and taxonomy. They can better categorize the techniques of the attacker. They can objectively decompose these threats to understand where the infrastructure has gaps, then they can prioritize them and get them remediated. Purple teams, something I've run into more frequently, is sort of a group typically in a large enterprise. It's usually internal, not an external contractor, but it could be, but they tend to make sure, it's closing the loop. Like, I've got threat intel, what do I do with it? They close the loop between what the red team does, what the blue team does, what the SOC implements day to day, to make sure that the learnings are applied. And again, MITRE ATT&CK is a common framework and language to help the purple team execute better and more efficiently. This one is picking up in heat, and then the fifth use case is also picking up in heat, right? Security control analysis is key. Vendor products are more different than not. Not all firewalls work the same way. And even if they have the same capability, they depend on configuration, they depend on what you do, and so you really have to know which one is right for you. MITRE ATT&CK gives you the potential to contrast and compare vendor products to see how they face the risks that your organization faces. So you can ask a vendor, how do you fare against the MITRE ATT&CK framework? Which techniques will you mitigate? And it's not exactly the same, or it's caveated by lots of things. You need to know that, right? I find that in a lot of mid-sized accounts, small accounts, and some large enterprises, people really aren't sure about exactly how their controls are set up to mitigate what types of threats. They're just not 100% sure. So you can classify your security controls by what you think they're going to do, and then you can think through, is this being achieved? And, based upon who you are, you'll want to frame this differently, to face your threats, your industry, and all those things. So talk to your vendors. How do they fare against MITRE ATT&CK? Start that discussion. It's a good discussion to have. The last one I really like. It's kind of new. It's a little boutique, but it's accelerating. Breach and attack simulation is a use case that's getting a lot of mileage. And breach and attack simulation refers to the ecosystem of third-party vendors that automate breach and attack simulation testing based upon the MITRE ATT&CK framework. This is a pretty powerful thing, right? This gives you an objective assessment of the performance of your security controls in your production environment and or your test environment. So obviously there's some setup here. You've got to know when alerts come in that these are coming from your breach and attack simulation system. It's all set up in a way that doesn't cause problems, of course, but it can answer the question, are my security controls working right now? MITRE ATT&CK lets you logically analyze that. This kind of software lets you answer the question definitively. And so when you go to the board, you have a problem, you can say, look, we've tested our security controls, and against the MITRE ATT&CK matrix, here's what we defend against. We had some holes, we fixed them, But unless we add 1.7 million to the budget, we are vulnerable to these 3 attacks that are hitting our industry, which threat intelligence recommends we defend against. It gives you an incredibly objective, detailed way to justify budgets and activities. You know, in every department, they justify budgets, you know, and here now you can say, we have holes, we've tested them, we can't defend against this attack, but here's what we recommend. So this is cool. Now, the devil's in the details. You have to learn more about this technology, but this one wraps right around the MITRE ATT&CK matrix to give you some high value. So in summary, I believe, and a growing group of us believe, that the use of MITRE ATT&CK is really compelling in terms of value for defenders. You know, you can now think like an attacker and, you know, meet them on their battlefront and stop them before they can execute their kill chain. It's a powerful open source tool. It helps you understand and classify, you know, their tactics, techniques, and procedures. Cyber defense teams, you know, can better design the strategy for security controls against the likely threats and tactics and techniques they will exhibit. Assess risk, that's that key word for your compliance, governance, IT, network, and cyber people, right? And then prioritize and reduce gaps in the defense to reduce those risks. When attacks happen, which will happen, you know, all of you will face an active attack that you haven't prevented, right? You get them every day in big companies. You can more rapidly identify the attacker. You can anticipate their next moves and shut them down. And that's the goal, right? That's where MITRE ATT&CK will help. It's a wonderful, powerful open source tool, and I'd recommend you learn more about it and discover the ways that it can help you. So thank you again to the audience. I'm going to turn it back to Navneet. I've seen some questions coming in. Navneet?
Yes. Thanks, Mike, and thank you for the detailed presentation on the MITRE ATT&CK topic. And I can tell that people are passionate about this topic, and we had quite a bit of interactions with our attendees. So with that, let's get to some of the questions that came in. The first one is asking, does the framework actually help tell who the cyber attackers are, and how is that possible?
Okay, good question. So as it turns out, it is really, really hard for attackers to change the tactics, techniques, and procedures they use, right? An attacker, especially a state-sponsored attacker, if they're building code, they would do everything to hide their identity, right? They would try to tinker with the code. They might even not execute it from their country. They might put someone on a plane, fly them to some neutral place, send them into an internet cafe. Who knows what they'll do? But when it comes to these attacks, the way that they execute technique to technique really provides clues and hints as to their identity. It's just who they are, and it's very hard to change. And so it's the best way to stop them is to figure out who they are. There's also guidance for detection and publicly available references to data in support of a specific technique, so you can, map that technique back to the threat group, and try to figure it out that way. So by mapping TTPs with MITRE ATT&CK, you can really develop an idea of who they are, what they might do next, and the best way to stop them. Once again, in the current state of the union, we're a government agency or we're a business, and we're just trying to keep our stuff safe, but these attackers, are attacking us, right? This is a war. And so we can't keep them out, but we can stop them before they can execute their kill chain, and that makes us successful. And identifying them, if possible, gives you tremendous amounts of clues to figure out how to do that best.
Oh, sounds great. Thank you. Another question that came in, it's asking, how does the framework go beyond typical attack analysis, and why is it important to understand post-attack behavior?
Yeah, I saw both of those questions. So post-attack really refers to the attacker's behavior once they're inside of your network. So they're in your network and you're snake bit, so to speak. It seems very likely in today's environment that at some point an attacker will get in your network. MITRE ATT&CK takes a much closer look at them once they get in, right? That's what they do. Given this assumption, a detailed focus on this post-exploit attacker behavior is the best way to find and stop an ongoing attack before they can steal data or destroy things. The MITRE ATT&CK Framework, helps you think like an attacker, so you can, balance your defense against the steps they're likely going to take. Not everyone can defend against every threat out there today all at once. You have to pick your targets and use your threat intel, and then, see where you are and use MITRE to build out the defense you think is going to use your budget dollars the best, right? So MITRE ATT&CK gives you the taxonomy to do this, the consistent language, and the common lexicon. And this is much stronger for the user, for the technique-to-technique behavior than most other frameworks out there.
Okay, sounds good. Another attendee is asking that what key cyber attack does MITRE ATT&CK protect me from?
Well, if we step your red team just decides to model. Hello?
Oh, hey, sorry, Michael. Yeah, we lost you right after I asked a question. So if you can start back from the beginning. Yes.
Okay. So what key cyber attacks does MITRE ATT&CK protect me from? So MITRE ATT&CK allows you to model and evaluate against any known and unknown cyber threats. Usually the unknown are invented by your red team, and you can view more unknown threats by just drilling down through the matrix. So we went through APT3, and while you can't protect from everything, you can use MITRE ATT&CK to help assess, what risks do you face, and then how good is your environment to protect against them, and then using your threat intelligence and your industry knowledge, with MITRE ATT&CK, frame everything up so that you've got the best defense in place you can have. So MITRE ATT&CK can model almost anything, known and unknown. Hello?
Thank you for that. Yes, yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry.
Yes, no worries. I know we can always have some trouble with the audio and stuff, but we can hear you just fine now. So we have one more question, and this person's asking, they just want you to explain the MITRE ATT&CK AEPs again. They just want to give a bit more information on that again. Yeah.
Sure. It would be too dangerous to go back through the slides, but I would say that AEPs show how attackers are connecting techniques sequentially. So an AEP enables a penetration tester in the red team to duplicate the same behavior and to some extent use the same or similar tools to model these attacks. So for example, a red team won't have all of the attacker tools, right? But you can get close. It also enables blue teams a better way to understand what's happening, objectively assess security controls, procedures, identify gaps. So AEP plans help with the diagnosis of an attack, and by identifying, the suspect cyber attack groups will more quickly alert you to what they might do next. Now, just to confirm, AEP plans are limited availability and conceptual right now, but MITRE has made that investment, and I think that list might grow over time. So, to the extent that they've done one, it's an easy and free resource for you to look at. And they can also help you structure, your internal methodologies and processes. So they're well worth an investment of your time.
Thank you so much for answering all the questions. Now, we just wanted to let all attendees know that once we close the webinar, please, if you guys can just take a few seconds and take our customer satisfaction survey and share your feedback, we will appreciate it. And thank you, Mike, for doing a wonderful job on the presentation today.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody, for attending. Have a great day.
Yes, thank you. And And on behalf of Infoblox and our presenter, thank you all for joining us today, and have a great rest of the day. Thank you.